All right, how's it going? My name's Amar. This is Alex, and we are going to talk about durable power of attorney. But before we start, here's some disclosures. Basically, we haven't taken your specific situation into account, and we're just giving this is for educational purposes only, and so on and so forth. Alex, do you have anything to add to those disclosures?
The same. It's just educational purposes and no official representation has been entered into.
There you go. So, what is a power of attorney? Why don't we start with that?
All right. So power of attorney is when you give authority to another person to act on your behalf. So that's the long and short of it.
Okay. So there's like different types of things that you would want, right? So there's like medical power of attorneys, financial. Sometimes those could be the same people. Sometimes they could be different, right?
Exactly. So maybe a great place to start in terms of just powers of attorney would be, I think a common one that comes up is, well, what's a durable power of attorney and how is that different from just a regular power of attorney? And so the main distinction with durable versus just a regular power of attorney is that with a durable power of attorney, it's effective and valid even if you become incapacitated. If you just were to execute a regular power of attorney, if you became incapacitated, that authority would terminate. And so you want if you're for estate planning purposes, you really do want a durable power of attorney because you want to make sure that in the event of incapacity, which is probably the reason you're creating this power of attorney in the first place, that the person you've authorized can continue acting on your behalf.
Yeah, no, that's a good point because there's there's power of attorneys that are springing when a certain event happens. Then there's durable, like you mentioned. In fact, I actually had to sign a power of attorney when we bought our house, like just for that transaction. There could be different. I guess it's good to have
authorizing your spouse, or what was that one for?
Yeah, exactly. And so there are different types of powers of attorney. The main point here is you want something that's durable because from an estate planning perspective, when you need it the most is when you're not able to act, right? In most of these cases.
Exactly.
And so I think, so what else would you say for, I guess, let's start with financial first and let's dive a little bit deeper in there. Who would you pick? How do you pick somebody? Like, where do you start, I guess?
Right. And I want to circle back though, because one of the things that you mentioned earlier was a springing power of attorney. And so that kind of is a good segue from like, okay, durable, we've already established what that means. And then, well, what is a springing power of attorney? And so a springing power of attorney means that it only becomes effective once you're incapacitated, right? And so versus it being effective immediately. And so you really have the choice of when you're creating a durable power of attorney, if you want it to be valid from the moment that you sign it, even if you become incapacitated in the future, or if you just want it to become effective when you become, or if you become incapacitated. And so as an estate planning attorney, my recommendation tends to be go for making it effective immediately. And sometimes that feels a little weird to somebody when they're like, well, why? If I can, does that mean that they can then like go and purchase a home in my on my behalf when, behind my back? And the answer is like, yes, absolutely, they could. But so here's the question that I pose to my clients. If you have concerns about naming someone with a power of attorney that's effective immediately because you don't know what they're going to do, well, then you probably shouldn't be naming them in the event you become incapacitated, because once you're incapacitated, or if you become incapacitated, you're not going to know what they're doing, right? You have to completely
It's not the right person for you.
Exactly. It's not the right person. So that really is like a really great question when you're choosing someone is, would I feel comfortable with them having this power immediately? And if the answer is no, then you might want to sit back a little bit and think, well, why is that? And that's not to say that if you do want it to be effective only upon incapacity, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be naming that person, but at least it helps answer some questions for yourself. Like, is it more to do with like your own personal feelings, or does it have more to do with the, their credibility, right? And their ability to do that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And not only, so there's a component of trust, right, that Alex and I have just talked about, but there's also a component from a financial standpoint of knowledge and the time, right, to do the things and the willingness to do those things. So I think there's multi-factors. So that's kind of how I guess we would navigate deciding who to be a power of attorney. But I mean, should it be family? Should it be a friend? Is there an age difference? Should it be like somebody like at least 15 years younger than me? Like what would you say are good guidelines?
So I would say for me, the recommendations that I give clients is that it really should be someone that you trust. That needs to be like the first thing.
Number one.
And it doesn't matter if they're necessarily older than you or younger than you, as long as it's someone that you trust and you know that they can do the job, right? And from there, though, the question about whether it should be a family member really has more to do with that person's ability to have the time, right? Because if they have a family and their career, they may not be able to do that. And so some options that I like clients to consider would be, obviously family members are fine, friends, or even what's called a private professional fiduciary, right? And so that's someone that's what they do for a living. And that person could be like a professional fiduciary. There's a ton that are listed on California's Professional Fiduciary Association of California. There's a link that you can check there. Or even sometimes banks are willing to do that, or even financial advisors. And my understanding is that Client First has that offering as well for their clients, right?
Yeah, we can step in to be trustees and financial power of attorneys, and I guess it's all on a case-by-case basis. One of the things that we should highlight is that the financial power of attorney is going to be able to legally sign your name, right? And so that is different than making medical decisions. So if we were to just change gears here and talk about the medical power of attorney, that person could be totally different, or it may be the same person, right? Like I guess there's different guidelines there too, right?
Exactly. So the nice thing about having two different documents, so you have the financial power of attorney and then you have the medical or the advanced healthcare directive, is that you are able to choose two completely different people. So the person that you might want to have listed as your financial power of attorney, making all of those financial decisions, may not necessarily be the person that you want listed as the person who's making your medical decisions. And so you can definitely bifurcate those roles, keep the financial stuff separate from your medical. And for the medical power of attorney, the importance of having that, if anyone has ever gone in, been admitted to the hospital, that's usually one of the first questions that a doctor or the hospital or the nurse is going to ask you. Do you have advanced healthcare directive on file? And if you don't, they're going to try to get that in place right away, especially if you're going into surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like part of the pre-surgery checklist of paperwork that you have to sign is the hospital will give you a temporary one for that specific hospital stay, but you should have your own, right? And that way you're covered. Most of the times we don't know when we're going to need to go to the hospital, right?
Exactly. So the last, the least opportune moment would be when it's an emergency and you're being carted away into the hospital. That's just not the great time to do it. So do that beforehand. And it's just an easy thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happens if you don't have these documents? I guess that's another question we should probably answer. Or do you have any other things that we should talk about? I mean,
actually, I could really go on and on about, and that it might be a different video series. But if you don't have a financial power of attorney, there's this awful thing that's called a conservatorship that would be needed. And so we'll end it with that and just say that's a different series, and that's a bad thing. That's in front of the court, having the court appoint someone, and we can definitely talk later about that. And if you don't have an advanced healthcare directive, then what ends up happening is, because there's not anything in our probate code that says who is given priority, what it says is basically that the hospital has to make a decision in their discretion who they think is the person that's closest to you to make that decision. And so I don't know about you, but I don't want the hospital figuring out who they want making that decision for me.
Yeah.
I want to be able to choose that person, because maybe it's not necessarily a parent or your partner or a sibling. Maybe it's a friend who's a nurse, right? And so that's not something that I would want a hospital to be making for me.
Yeah, oftentimes, like sometimes, I see clients where they have, multiple children, and one child may be in a medical profession, which would be great as a healthcare power of attorney. And you may have a child that's in a business or financial that understands numbers really well, like an engineer or what have you. And they may be better suited as a financial power of attorney, right?
Exactly. And another common request that clients sometimes make to me is they want to name two individuals or more. Like, so let's say they want their children making those decisions for them, whether it's financial or healthcare. But let's focus on the healthcare. If you have more than one person named as your agent, then the problem could possibly arise where if they're not in agreement with what type of services or treatment that you should be doing, how does that become, who's the tiebreaker, right? And so that's something that I need to chat with clients about.
I didn't even think about that, because if you list two people and they both have equal power, and what if they disagree, right? And sometimes I've also seen like you need a doctor's note or something, right? To as like the third or tiebreaker or something like that. That could be part of it. What about, would you, and I think we would agree on this, is that if you have a primary, you should also have a contingent or somebody to backstop that person or
absolutely. Yeah. So you don't want to just like name one. I mean, obviously if you only have one person that you can name, okay, fine. But it is always better to have a list of individuals. At least two would be my recommendation, but you could have even more, and you would do it in order. You'd say, this is the first person, but if they're not able or available, then let's move on to the second person. And that's going to, because we don't know if we're going to be in an accident or something's going to happen with the person that we've named as well, especially if it's a family member that you're naming.
Yeah. I mean, if you're in a car accident, you both could be in the same car, right?
And Amar, you had mentioned you had a story about, I don't know if it was a family member?
No, well, it's actually a personal story. So when I moved back to San Diego, my dad's health started to deteriorate, and he actually was in the hospital, and we had to decide end of life care for my dad. And it was one of those things that was, we were so emotional. We wanted to be at the hospital. The doctor's asking for these healthcare directives, and I'm like, yeah, we have them. And their response was, well, where are they? You need to go get them, right? And they're in this fancy binder at home, just sitting on and collecting dust, if you will. This is the trouble. When you need these documents, you're going to want to have accessibility to these documents. And it's something that we've learned and that we've implemented in our practice here is to have a virtual portal where you could call somebody else and they could send it to the hospital on your behalf. Luckily for me, we had family in town that was staying at our house, and they were able to bring some of those documents to the hospital. But keep in mind, these are emotional times when you're trying to invoke either the healthcare directive or even the power of attorney for financial stuff, right?
Exactly.
And you do something similar too, right, Alex?
Yeah. So I give clients the option of signing up for something that's called Legal Vault. And so it's kind of a similar concept. It's a membership, but it does give you the ability to access your documents and or allow a third party to access. And so you're not allowing access to like private documents. It's just the documents that you want them to have. So for example, the Advanced Healthcare Directive. But more importantly, what I also advise clients is that when they do get their Advanced Healthcare Directive, to give that to your professional, your healthcare professional, right? And so now with portals for Sharp or whoever your health provider is, you're able to like go directly onto the portal and upload these documents. So that's the best way of doing it.
Yeah, the local hospital here uses I think it's called My Charts, right? You've heard of My Charts?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have this little upload button, and now you can just upload it directly just using your phone. You don't really, so technology is changing some of these documents in terms of accessibility, but the big thing here is to make sure that you actually have these documents, right? And I think
Exactly.
that's a
Just
big
start the
piece
conversation, right? That's kind of the hardest thing, is just to get the ball rolling and have those conversations with your loved ones.
Yeah. So that was good. I think we talked about power of attorney as well here in terms of summarizing. You need to have one. One's to so that somebody can legally sign your name and do financial matters. Other ones to make healthcare decisions. Um, and picking somebody that has the time, and the capacity, the knowledge base, and proximity is probably really important. Is there anything else we should add before we wrap this up, Alex?
No, I think we at least touched the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, and obviously there's more, but I think that's good for now.